Hi, this is Leo Bray for Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center. Visit us on the web at urbanyoga.org or on Facebook at Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center. There you can stop by the tip jar to make contributions. All these online classes, which are live on Zoom and later on YouTube, are donation-based. And you can also, at either of those places, check out the schedule, which changes each month. Middle of the month right now, so no changes for a couple of weeks. Today, no one has joined me on Zoom, so what we do then is I get to make a shorter video for you to enjoy on YouTube when you don't have an hour to spend on your practice. So today we're going to look at pigeon pose, and then because it's not always accessible, at some alternatives to pigeon pose. So why might pigeon pose not be accessible? It could be for a variety of reasons. The most common ones seem to be knee trouble comes up first, and you're in pigeon, as you'll see when I show you the pose. You have a leg bent and the full weight of your body on top of it. So that can be a lot depending on what's going on with your knees. And also pigeon is a deep exploration of the hip. So of course, if there's an issue in your hip, pigeon may be more than what you need on a given day. But that doesn't mean that we can't wring out some of the excess tension that resides in the hips. We can't open things up gently and carefully without going as far as pigeon, just going as far as the body wants. So before I show pigeon for the first side, I'll show the sequence I like to do before getting into it. And of course, we wouldn't generally start a practice with pigeon. We do some warming up movements. This is not going to be an hour video, so I'm not going to spend 15 or 20 minutes warming you up. I've done some movements before I started recording. And I'm going to show you the sequence that I find the most smooth and pleasant way for me to come into pigeon. There's lots of different ways you can come into it. Some prefer to come into it from a low lunge, or to even start with the bent leg on the ground and work back from there. So there's probably ways to get into it I haven't seen before. Maybe you have a way that you prefer. Maybe you'll come up with a way no one's ever done, but that's probably unlikely. Who knows? What do they say? Isaac Newton said, what we know is a drop and what we don't know is the ocean. That goes for yoga. I've seen a lot of things, and I bet there's way more I haven't seen. So I like to come into pigeon from downward dog and a warming sequence. So I'll show you how that goes. So we probably would have done, like some sun salutations. That's usually how we end up in downward dog. And actually, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to have my right leg under me, the hip that's not bothering me. See, I'm going to do the easier, more accessible stuff with my left leg because my left hip is acting up. So typically, from downward dog, we do some three-legged dog, and that can be just like this. We do some hip stacking, either with the leg bent or straight. And I like to get some of these circles in, somewhere leading up to the pigeon. And I really enjoy this sequence. So from three-legged dog, coming here, drawing the knee forward as you exhale, and then sending this foot over to the opposite side of the mat, resting on the outer edge of your foot. This is star pose. If you want, if you feel up for it, you can play with fallen star like this, reaching this hand up. Maybe that's too much. So that helps prepare the hip for pigeon. So then from three-legged dog here, exhaling, draw the knee towards the wrist on the same side, draw the ankle towards the opposite wrist. Let the lower leg just land, never forcing anything. Staying long in the spine here, long arms at first, let the back knee down, uncurl the back toes. I like to glance back at that leg and just see that it's in line with the hip. If this leg's over here towards center, over here out to the side, it's going to affect how things go from there. So it's best to have that leg in line with this hip, okay? Now, I like to say that before we go down, we go up. So pressing into the hands, you could even have blocks under your hands, maybe tented fingertips. Inhale, lift up, look up. Exhale, release, come forward and down. And just let gravity and breath be in charge and see where your hips want to go. So the pose is going to keep evolving. Allow yourself room. Now, I left the blocks at the wrong end of the mat. You could have blocks under your hands or blocks under your forearms. I'm not going to undo this and go get my blocks. But I know from experience, generally I can come down to my forearms, keeping the spine long throughout. So as my hips open and settle, maybe I bring my arms forward. And then the long leg, see, I can scoot this left knee, left ankle, whole left leg really, back. I can scoot the elbows forward. So sometimes we end up down here. Your head could rest on a block or on your hands, or maybe, I knew my head would probably come to the floor because it generally does. And we breathe. And generally spend at least half a minute once you've gone to the trouble of getting here. I like to spend a minute or two, really. And as you breathe here, things may continue to open and settle and sink down some more, but we're not pushing down. Just letting the breath do the work, letting that opening happen from the inside out. Now, if your pelvis tilts to one side or another, you can take a block and put it under the lower side. So if I was canted over here to the right, I could put one here. If I'm canted to the left, I could put it under the left foot. I'm not watching the clock. If you're practicing on your own and it doesn't matter what the time is, you can just stay here until you feel like coming out. Until it feels like you've had enough, until it feels like the hips aren't going to open anymore. That's a really delicious thing to do, to just stay in pigeon until that hip is opened as much as it comfortably can. And we want to take the time coming out, nice and slowly like we came in. Think of rewinding. So everything we did to get here, I'm going to do in reverse. Bringing the elbows back. Don't actually have to undo everything. You could scoot the knee forward in the foot, or you could wait. Well, you come up here, long spine, long arms. Now, sometimes when we come out, this is just a bonus we like to throw in. Often we like to bend this foot and reach back for a bind. I like to use the opposite hand. Some folks like to use the hand on the same side. That makes some of us very tippy. I feel like I'm going to tip over. If I did this with my left hand instead of my right, I know from experience that I would feel like I'm tipping to the left. More limber folks, sometimes the heel goes to the butt. Some folks reach back with both hands or tuck their toes into their armpit or touch their head to their foot. You won't see any of that here today. So this might be the point where you scoot the knee forward if you didn't already, because then we're going to come out, curl the toes under, press into the foot to lift the knee. Now the legs engaged. Big inhale, press into the hands and lift the right leg slowly back and up. And then I was taught to repeat this part. Bend the knee, stack the hips, flex the foot, circle this knee a couple times each way. Pigeon is great for the joint, but it compresses your femoral artery. It's one of the biggest arteries. And that reduces circulation to the leg. So this kind of speeds the circulation back into the area. Exhale, let the foot down. And I love to just do this after doing pigeon on one side. Inhale, lift the heel. Maybe you come up on your toes. I like to come up on my big toes like that. That feels good to me. Exhale, come down. Not everyone does that after pigeon, but I do. So now what do we do if there's something going on in the knee, in the hip, whatever it is, some reason to not do pigeon? A couple of things we could do. We can lie down on the ground like this, heels in close to the butt, cross ankle over knee, figure four legs, and then bring your hands to the leg where the foot's on the floor and draw that knee towards you. Now stay grounded in your sacrum, shoulder blades, and hands. Don't be lifting off the ground. And the knee doesn't move much. It doesn't matter because this is about your hips. But that's the energy. That's the direction, drawing the knee towards the torso. Some folks can interlock their fingers behind their knee. I can't quite do that. My fingertips touch, but that's it. Whatever you can do. Maybe your hands are just on the side of your thigh. You could even have a strap here around your leg if that makes it easier for you, around the front of the leg or behind the knee. Always more than one way to do these things. And after a few breaths there, I usually do like 6 breaths. Bring the other hand to the other knee, nudge this knee out while drawing the other one in. And then we get into both hips. 6 breaths there, maybe 10, maybe 20, whatever you want. And take your time. Just because it's an easier, more accessible posture doesn't mean we have to rush. Release the arms, release the legs. Sometimes it's nice to just pause, take some noticing breath. And just for the sake of the camera, I'll show it to you on the other side. Give you a different view of the action. Maybe see how dirty the teacher's feet are today. Sometimes it just pops into my head when I'm pointing my feet at the camera. Hey, I'm outside, you know. I swept up before class, but I didn't mop the terrace, you know. I'll just give you the other view of how this looks, and the legs and the hips and where the hands are. So maybe pigeon, traditional pigeon, is the most difficult or least accessible of the options. That's probably the easiest and most accessible. Now I'll show you maybe the middle of the road. And again, everybody's different. Each day is different. Now this is a standing balance. You could, if you want, step over by a piece of furniture or a wall to hold on to, because we're going to play with standing on one leg with the legs bent in a similar way to the way I just was on the floor. I'm not going to lean on this table and chop my head off from the camera. I'm not going to lean on this fence. I happen to know I can do this without leaning on something. So, and as always, when we do play around with standing on one leg, if you fall, that's part of practice. You learn to fall with control, learn to fall safely, and we learn to get up again. So this thing is sometimes called standing half pigeon. I'm sure there are other names for it. That's the one that I learned. So we cross the ankle above the knee, hands to the heart, pressing your hands to center line, pressing them together, pressing them to the sternum is steadying, drawing energy to the midline. And keep breathing throughout. Sometimes when we play with something challenging, like standing on one leg, we hold our breath. No good reason, and it doesn't help. Keep the standing knee soft and responsive. We don't want to lock knee. Okay? And as if there's a bench or a seat back here, whatever you want to sit on, a bar stool, a couch. We're going to take our time and sit like you're going to sit down cross-legged. You can keep pressing your hands together and keep your spine long. Imagine your elbows approaching that knee and that foot. Now, if I was facing the camera, I could watch myself. If you've got a mirror or a window in your practice space, you can watch your reflection. But even if you can't see, you can just imagine. And I really don't know until I'm doing it whether that's going to happen. There's the knee to the elbow. I don't think the other elbow is going to touch the foot, but sometimes it does. And we just play with staying here as long as we like, just like we did in Pigeon. Of course, with the added dynamic of it's harder to stay here because I'm balancing on one leg. Maybe there's a wall here, maybe there's a table, a desk to grab onto. But when there isn't, well, it's not always a choice how long you're going to stay. And eventually, I'm not going to be able to stay here anymore. Then we just inhale, slowly straighten up, uncross, release, whatever control you can muster to strengthen that slowness. Any standing balance, when you're done with it, feels good to shake the leg you were standing on, maybe shake the other one, take anything you want. And I'll do the other leg just to show the front view. When I didn't say, like I do with tree pose, sometimes it's nice to rock back and forth as you begin. This can help your feet find their way under your hips if they maybe weren't already there. With long practice, my feet were already under my hips without thinking about it. So we let the weight come into that leg, keep the knee soft, raise the other knee, cross the ankle, dial the knee towards the floor. And I think I forgot to say, flex the foot up. We want to flex this foot up. This helps protect this knee as we come down. And just take your time. We keep breathing. We keep pressing to the midline. We'll see what happens. So now I can watch. One thing about watching yourself, it's not steadying to watch yourself. It's the exact opposite. When I see my image sway, it makes me less steady. Better to keep your eyes on a fixed point at about eye level, or let your gaze just go soft and unfocused. It looks like the same kind of thing's going to happen here. Get the foot to the knee. The elbow to the knee, but not to the foot. Get the body parts confused. I'm not going to push this elbow down there because it doesn't matter whether it touches my foot or not. If it does, it's nicely steadying. So one elbow is steadying, two is more steadying. And I will show a variation that we can do here, even if we don't get the elbows touching. If you like when you come out, if you're feeling tricky, it feels really neat to support the weight of this leg and then stand and then let it down. Feels great in that hip. And it looks kind of funny. So I keep it in a mental file I call party trick yoga. Some things are just visually fun. So that's it for today. That is the whole video. Pigeon, a couple of alternatives to Pigeon. And I will see you next time. I hope somebody here live with me. We could do a whole hour. If not, we'll have another short video. Thanks for tuning in. Namaste.